they change altitude, right? And this is kind of a metaphor for what we do as Agilists, right? We are reacting to changes, whether it be shifts in airflow or changes in the climate around us, changes to the professional atmosphere or professional landscape. We have to adapt. And that's what we're going to be talking about today is how should we be adapting? How can we reflect in ways that help us make good decisions about how we adapt? So let me just introduce you to the goals that I'm hoping to achieve today. There's three main ones. So the first one is just reflect on where you're feeling turbulence. Second one, I'm going to be doing some personal sharing here about how helping others at a time when I needed help was really a powerful shift for me, and I think it can be for you as well. And then the third one is just talking about Ikigai. And for those of you that are already familiar with it, you might know a bit of the history. I'm going to be talking about both sort of main ways that Ikigai gets talked about. One is the Japanese philosophy of Ikigai, and the other one is actually the framework that was made popular by Mark Wynn about 6 years ago. And we're going to be talking a little bit about both of those things. I think they're both useful in their own ways. So let's start off with a little activity. What I am hoping that you all do here with me is there's a bunch of Post-its you'll see on the board below. If you've never used Miro before and you just got on the board, make sure that you select the selector tool at the top, not the hand tool. The selector will actually allow you to drag Post-its from the bottom here onto this nice image of a plane that's going through turbulence. So it's just a little reflection here. What are your sources of turbulence? Put like 2 or 3 top ones for you. It doesn't matter if it's deeply personal or surface level. It's just more about recognition of what's causing turbulence for you right now. Don't feel like you need to share anything super, super personal. If you think about it, just acknowledge it and let it go. That's also good for this. So again, that particular activity, it's just a little bit of reflection to think about what's causing you turbulence right now to get us in that headspace. But now what I want to do is share a little bit about my 2020. So it's probably been in many ways similar to yours, with the exception of maybe the first one, which I don't wish upon anyone here. But I started my 2020 in January with Bell's palsy, which meant that half of my face was paralyzed. And when you're a coach and a lot of it is about connecting with other people and you can't emote, that is quite challenging. So for vanity reasons or non-vanity reasons, it wasn't a fun time for me. And then Australian bushfires, I think you all read about that. My mother's side of the family, most of them are in Australia. So that hit pretty close to home for me as well. Then the pandemic, unless you're under a rock, I think we've all been experiencing some pretty close to home stuff that's been affecting our personal lives or professional lives from that. And then the one that actually is one of the drivers for this talk here is that I lost a job that I loved. I was a coach for Eventbrite for several years with some really great people, was learning a lot. I probably would not have left for quite some time, but as it were, with COVID-19, as you can imagine, Eventbrite is in the business of creating a space for people to meet in person with events, and that became very difficult, if not illegal, to do once the pandemic hit. So that definitely affected me. So that was my 2020, and I ran out of space on the slide. There's a lot of stuff that's been happening in 2020. I think we all know that, and you can see just on that previous exercise, there's things personal to you all that are affecting you as well. But what I did feel like here is that image. I felt like one of those toy punching bags. And the toy punching bag that I chose is Yogi Bear, mostly because since I've been stuck at home, I've been hungry all the time. I'm not sure about you all, but that's been true for me. So I picked that one, but I also in many ways felt like Bozo the Clown on the right there. And that's because every time I started to feel a little bit of center and getting back to normal, like I was bouncing back, another hit came, and then another one, and then another one. So it was always trying to find center. I was always trying to get back to some kind of normal. So if you follow that arrow down, you'll notice that popular meme there. This is fine, everything's fine. And I think this is how many of us have felt in 2020. And what I'd love to do just for a moment here is have all of you, you'll notice there's some dots below. Just think about when the house is on fire, the world is on fire, there's a lot affecting you. What's your go-to? What's the first thing that you do? Do you ask for help? Do you deal with it on your own? Or door number 3, do you help others? So just go ahead and again, use the cursor tool, not the hand tool. Grab a dot and drop it on the one that resonates with you. That's your go-to. There's no right answer or wrong answer. I'll be talking a little bit more personally in a second about how I act and how I now choose to act. Well, if you didn't get a chance, that's okay. We're going to move forward. It was more just to see a pattern here. But you can see the majority of the votes here for deal with it on your own. That is also my go-to. When I lost my job at Eventbrite, my first reaction was, of course, start looking at what jobs are out there, start refreshing my resume, everything that I could possibly do that would make me feel like I was in control and doing something to better my situation, right? And then the second thing, and again, some of you on this call know this because I actually reached out to you, is I usually ask for help. And that's something that it takes bravery sometimes to do, but I definitely try and do that a lot more now than I ever used to. So those were my first 2 go-tos. And help others, that's something that hadn't occurred to me that might actually also be extremely beneficial. And so what actually happened, I'll share this personal experience again, like being the good punching bag that I am, trying to find center. I dealt with it on my own. I asked for help. And then what happened to me was 2 people from my past reached out to me. One said, hey, I noticed this has happened to you. I'm really sorry. Is there anything you need from me? Even if it's just to listen, can I just offer you some encouragement? And that's what they did. And the second person that reached out to me said, hey, if you need, I can review your resume and provide you some help there. I can connect you to people that I know. And what was really interesting about it is in talking with both of them, they were also both unemployed. And so when they reached out to me to help me, they were, in essence, and what I'm going to be describing in a second, helping themselves. So now let me bring you up here. And I'm going to pull a little trick here and have everyone come up to me. So help yourself, and to help yourself, start by helping others. And this is kind of what I'm going to be talking about for the next few minutes here. And I pulled this quote from an article from the New York Times that was written in April 2020. That was the same month that I was let go from Eventbrite. I didn't actually find the article in the month that it was written. It was actually several months later that I found this. But what I did find out when reading it is that it was describing a lot of what I was feeling and going through. It really resonated. Some of these points really resonated for me. So I'm not gonna go through in a huge amount of detail what was in that article. I did link to it in this board, so if you wanna go read it for yourself, you can. But there were 4 main things that the article talked about. One is that by helping others, you get a helper's high, and that was true for me. There is a chemical reaction that actually happens when you're helping others. You release serotonin and dopamine and oxytocin, and those help you feel well-being. They help you feel motivated. They help you feel connection to others. They also did some research and found that during times that people were volunteering or helping others, their cortisol levels were reduced, and that is the stress hormone. So there's actually a biological thing that happens here that helps you when you're helping others. Another thing that the article talked about was motivation and perspective. I don't know that I needed a lot of motivation to help other people. I mean, that's one of the reasons I became a coach, but it did give me some perspective. What it did for me was, I think most of the time you realize that you're much better at giving other people, especially if you're a coach on this call, you're much better at giving advice to other people than you are giving it to yourself. I know for sure. Um, I My wife gives me advice that I would never give myself, and that's the way of the world, and it's usually right. And that was pulled from Dr. Adam Grant for those of you that are fans. Um, and then another thing that helped me was to regulate my own emotions. When I'm helping other people, I'm feeling a greater sense of control. It's easier to kind of deal with the punches that are coming in my way, right? So one of the things that they wrote about here in terms of purpose, that actually was not something that felt true for me when I was helping others, because it wasn't like I was going to drop everything and become a recruiter or make it my life's work just to only help people on LinkedIn or any of that. I didn't have that kind of aha moment, but the other three things were definitely true. The purpose one we'll get to in a second. That's where Ikigai comes in. But there was also another unintended side effect of this, and I was feeling nervous here. This is me, the little emoji. And I was seeing other people on LinkedIn. Some of my friends, some of my past colleagues were also feeling that way. And I started paying attention, right? I started looking for people that were reaching out for help. I started noticing that people were posting on LinkedIn in similar situations. They were recruiters. I mean, recruiters are recruiters. They're always reaching out, right? But recruiters started reaching out to me, and I started paying attention. I was actually saying yes to recruiters on LinkedIn, yes to friends that I had never met on LinkedIn, yes to people asking for me to review their resume, yes to people connecting me to other people in my LinkedIn. I was actually saying yes to everything. And pretty soon, all of those people are now, I don't know if they're perfectly smiling emojis, but they were definitely in a happier place that I was helping them. And that, of course, in turn made me feel like I was happy. And the nice thing about this is now these are building relationships, right? And this is actually what happened. The reason that I'm talking to you now and I'm still not looking for a position is a relationship I made a long time ago with somebody by saying yes, by agreeing to be in a meetup similar to this, made a connection with the CEO of Miro. And he reached out to me after he found out that I was unemployed. And that's one of the reasons that ever even got put on my radar as an opportunity for me, is when you help other people, they can help you back. I mean, that's just, it makes sense, right? So I encourage all of you, find ways to help other people right now, because for many reasons, some of which I've just shown you, it's a good thing. So the next thing that I want to talk to you about again is this purpose thing, right? I wasn't finding purpose necessarily in helping others, but this model came back to me, and I was first introduced to this about, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago. And I think this was actually made popular, like I said, about 6 years ago when Mark Wynn wrote about this particular framework. And he blogged about it. It got a lot of traction. The reason that I both credited him and Andres Zuzunaga is because he came forward and said, you know, actually, I translated this model from Spanish to English and changed the middle from purpose to ikigai. And that's really his contribution to it. But what I consider his real contribution to this is he made it famous. And now it's a tool that other people can use. And if I'm talking about ikigai, the philosophy, the reason that he put it in the center there, ikigai, there's different translations for it. It doesn't perfectly translate to English, but many of the popular ways that it's translated is reason for being, or purpose in life, or the happiness of being busy, which is probably the closest thing to the Japanese version of it. Because what they meant by ikigai isn't your purpose in your entire life, it's your purpose in your day-to-day life. And a lot of that is in small rituals. A lot of that is just in doing, you know, little things that make you happy throughout the day and finding value and purpose in that. And we can talk about that again in a little bit. What we're really going to be focusing on mostly for today is Ikigai, the framework, which again is about finding your purpose. But because this is the westernized version, I think it suits more for either entrepreneurship or career coaching, finding your way in terms of the professional landscape. So that's what I'm hoping to get out of today as well, is we're going to try and use this Ikigai framework to reflect and see if we can't bring some insights to life here for ourselves about what's happening out there in the agile professional landscape and how we might prepare for a post-COVID future. So what I want to do here is a little exercise, and I don't know exactly how many people have, but it's small. And we're gonna, in your small group, when you get put in a room, a Zoom room, you can click on the corresponding group number here to the right. And what it's gonna do is then take you to your own Ikigai board. And I'll show you what that looks like before we do it. So you'll come to a board like this, and there's instructions right there for your group. So zoom in a little bit. It's going to be about 20 minutes of discussion, and you're going to be focusing just on the two bottom right-ish quadrants, which is what the world needs and what you can be paid for. So let me explain this Ikigai framework a little bit before you enter into this activity. So the way that Mark Wynn described this is basically there's four main drivers for your purpose in life that should help you be fulfilled. It's what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. And again, when we break off into groups in a second, we're really going to be focusing on those two right ones, what the world, or the right and the bottom one, what the world needs and what you can be paid for. The reason that I'm not focusing on the left and the top one is that's probably something you can do on your own, just like personal reflection, what you love and what you're good at. The other thing that Mark Wynn said was that Ikigai is in the center, that it's in the perfect, in this Venn diagram, it's in that perfect balance between what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. And I actually don't believe that that's true for everyone. Maybe it's true for some of us, but if you look for your balance, maybe you place a little more stock in what you love and what you're good at. And so maybe your Ikigai is a little bit more left or above center, right? Or maybe you're just really passionate about what the world needs. So maybe your Ikigai is just right of center, right? But what I think that this model actually does offer and is great at is helping you think about some of these drivers when you are thinking about your current situation, for example, right? The job climate might not be great right now, but if you look at your current situation or if you're looking for a new role, you can take a look at this framework and what makes you feel fulfilled. And that might, if you have a current role that you're in, might make you consider bringing some other things into your current role. Maybe there's not enough of what you love in your current role. This actually happened while I was coaching another person. They were going to take on a new role, and I just had them list out everything that they love. And what they found was only one of the things that they love in life was true in their current job. And so it was a chance for them to reinvent their role as they moved into this new role to bring more of it in. And then what you're good at. Again, some of these things we've let go in the past, right? Because jobs tend to be little boxes that we get put in based on the job description sometimes. So sometimes what we're good at and what we love doesn't factor in. So sometimes we need to reclaim those things. And I think that's a powerful way to use this framework, is try and reclaim some of what you love and some of what you're good at, right? The other two things, again, which I'm hoping to get a little bit of wisdom from the crowd here, is what the world needs and what you can be paid for. And that's not something that I can necessarily tell you. I'm just but one perspective, but I'm hoping that the wise people here in this community can bring a little bit of insight, and maybe we'll find some patterns here. So does that make sense to everyone? I was waiting for maybe the end to have questions, but I want to make sure that at least the framework is clear. So if you have any questions, I think that would be a good time. Anything? Great. So, okay. Oh, somebody just unmuted. Go ahead.
So there's a question in the chat, Pete, from Michael Lyons.
Okay.
That says, I missed your last point. So Michael, if you want to unmute and just ask the question, feel free to do that.
I see the Venn diagram, but you were making some points about it, and I just didn't quite get the last one.
The point that I was trying to make is that if you're using this Venn diagram, maybe your center is not really the center of this diagram. It might be somewhere to the left or right of it. And if you are thinking about your current role or potentially a future role, sometimes it helps to just do a little reflection about what drivers really matter to you and where you can actually bring some of these things in. So like I was saying, Our jobs tend to be little boxes that we get put in based on job descriptions. So sometimes we have to give up parts of what we love or what we're good at, but we don't necessarily need to. Like I said, I was coaching a person and they found that they barely did anything that they love in their role. And they were able to think about how they could bring more of that into their role. It might be a way for you to help decide whether a job is right for you. If you get an opportunity, it doesn't look like something you would have entertained before. If it has a lot of what you love in it, and maybe you're a little afraid that you're not good at it, but it also is something that the world needs, and your ikigai is, top right, like maybe that job isn't so bad. Maybe you should try it out, right? So that's a way that you can just kind of expand your options, expand your horizons. Thank you for the question. So let's go ahead and let's do this activity. Each of you is going to go into a little breakout room. Again, your group number should be the Zoom breakout number. And you click on the link that I have posted just to the right of the slide right here. And that'll take you to your particular diagram. And again, just work on the what can you paid for and what the world needs. If you have a little extra time, I thought it might also be an interesting exercise using this Ikigai model to think about what the world will need and what you can or what you could be paid for. That's just a slightly different spin on this Ikigai model, the same way that I'm saying you might be able to reclaim what you were good at and what you once loved. Thinking about the future is another way in which you can expand this model for yourself. So I have a couple of examples here to help you as well, because just talking about what the world needs right now, that's pretty broad, right? I want to zoom in just a little bit from that. Obviously, the world needs a haircut right now. The world needs bar mitzvahs. The world needs grandparents and clowns at birthday parties. We don't really need to talk about, well, maybe not clowns, but we don't need to talk about all of that. We just want to talk about, from a professional sense, what problems exist that agile ways of working can help solve. So right here, this sticky. Are they the same? Are new problems emerging? So that's what the world needs, right? What can you be paid for? An example is, what types of work are consultants getting? Is having agile experience as an engineer, product manager, or as a designer, is that much of a differentiator right now? Those are just some examples of things you can talk about. What patterns are you noticing that companies really want in a role, whether it be from a coach or just, any other role in business? All insights are good. So then after we do this activity, I also want you, as per instructions, to dedicate one person to be your representative. So obviously we're going to try and do some synthesis here so that we see what the entire group is saying. So just have somebody that can present some of the highlights from your group discussion. So when we come back after 20 minutes, I'm going to ask each group to just talk for a couple minutes about some of the highlights that they had in their discussion. We're just waiting for the rest of our participants to join back. It looks like I think we have mostly everyone back here. So again, welcome back everyone from your small group discussions back to the main room. And I really sincerely hope that you had some really interesting discussions, some really interesting finds. And what we're going to be asking you to do now is share with the rest of the group, because I think everybody probably has fear of missing out right now because you want to hear what everyone else came up with. So I'm just going to go in order, and I'm going to have group one go first. But before you do, I want to again just really quickly tie it back to what we've been talking about, especially if there were a few people I think that kind of joined the meeting a bit late and didn't understand what we were doing. So we were looking at the Ikigai framework, and those of you who went into small breakouts were hopefully having really good discussion about the two smaller quadrants of Ikigai. So the two smaller quadrants being what you can be paid for at the bottom and what the world needs. So hopefully this is going to help everybody in this entire community have some kind of insight to make good decisions about how you might position yourself if you're a consultant, how if you're in a current role, Might give you some ideas about what other people are doing, how people are preparing for a post-COVID lockdown world. But we'll see. Let's see what we came up with. So let's start with group one. So whoever is your representative, if you can go ahead and just share some of the highlights. I'm going to time it because so that we're not here all night, I'm going to make sure that we have maybe a couple of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes for each group to present. So I'm just going to use my own timer here and go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. So just to walk everyone through, we affinity mapped some of our ideas so then that way we have like thematic things that came up to mind. It revolves around getting a sense of safety, making sure that we're healthy, so that we can survive on. And then a lot of things that are contemporary to all of our minds around economy. How do we plan? How do we enable ourselves to be able to go back to some kind of normalcy, right? And then while we're doing that, finding a sense of balance and having ways of enjoying ourselves and having compassion to be able to just navigate this, until we find like some kind of resolution. And that's kind of the things that we were thinking about around around our lives. And I think we have like a parent in the room that had returning to school so that their kids could be fruitful citizens in the future. And that's kind of what we would like if to make the world a better place. Before I move on to the next section, anyone in group one like to add on to what I just mentioned? Okay, so then some things that we might be able to get paid for. Also, we also did some more affinity mapping, and given that we're a lot of us agilists and project managers, we kind of evolved around that. And these are the things that maybe we can do. Maybe some places like Upwork, Fiverr, are places and forums that we can use for that. Providing our services. While we're doing that, I think we're finding some time to network and teach each other. I think also us joining this session allows us to do that as well, building those networks. UX design came up too, so maybe other skill sets in addition to agile minded things. And then we also adapt the portfolio. So I think this is like a suite of things that maybe we can. I'll recruit one of our team members come out on this.
Yeah, I can add. Thanks, Roger. On this one, basically the whole idea is our traditional ways of planning, for example, annual planning, are no longer going to work, like thinking a year in advance, planning out detailed features. It's not going to be possible anymore, especially in a dynamic environment like where we are right now from a COVID standpoint. And I think skills of adaptive portfolio management are very highly in demand right now. People are beginning to realize that we are living in a world now of zero waste, and the closer we align to it will help. So organizing for, a better way to plan, more adaptive way, this is something that, we can definitely get paid for. Thanks, Roger.
Thanks. And that's group one.
Thank you both. Thank you very much for sharing. Group two.
That is me, I guess, representing group two. We had a few people who participated with phones or other devices that really couldn't contribute to the Miro board. So unfortunately, I don't recall everything that they contributed, but I'll go through what we have on the board. One that we started with was what the world needs. Basically, we talked about safety, having an environment where people feel secure and safe, where we focus on emotional intelligence, social intelligence, and collaborative intelligence, slowing down our work, putting in work in progress limits, working from integrity and empathy, and those human qualities. They seem to be in high need at the moment. Anything that brings out a sense of normalcy, peace, and of course the physical concerns we have around getting a vaccine in place, doing contact tracing so we can get back into the world and not be locked in at home. focusing on customer-centric products and services. So making sure that what we actually produce focuses on the needs of customers. Having good online meetings and having good online collaboration are also things that we think that the world needs. And slowing down a bit. And then moving to what we can be paid for, we were kind of dry on that. The working with our hands is one thing we can be paid for, we think. Knowledge work, web and mobile services, if we have experience as programmers and developers, and software creation. And then I happen to put down the sticky, I have no clue, because if I had a clue what I can get paid for, I'd be working right now. That I would ask anybody who feels like I missed something to supplement what I said.
Thank you, Olaf. Before we move to the next group, just a third-party observation is a lot of the stuff that you all came up with that the world needs right now seems to be, in my opinion, things that you might also be paid for. Things like building trust within teams, teaching people to have good online meetings, teaching people about the Pomodoro technique. There seems to be a lot of things there that as coaches, at least for me, these are things that I do at Miro and did at Eventbrite as well. Teaching people about emotional intelligence is extremely productive and in demand, I also believe. But again, it's just my third-party view of it. I think that you might be hitting on something there. So let's go to group 3. What did you have?
Group 1 and group 2. We are group 3 with Judy, Dale, Manuai, and David. And for what the world needs,
we can barely hear you.
Thank you. Group 1 and group 2. We are group 3 with Judy, Dale, Manuai, and David. For group 3, we talk more about empathy, what the world needs. The world needs someone who can listen well, providing space for the person to talk about the situation or the issue, and to be not offering solution or trying to agree or against what has been discussed. So empathy, that is something that I think the world needs. And David shared about what some of the party or country has done in supporting the people who need of more support, especially in the mental related service. And in terms of what we can offer, I think one thing we share is, so far, most of us in the Agile space are offering service related to IT or technology. So we see great opportunity in non-technology area, like restaurant. That one example given, that how to move the restaurant to the modern world, or alternative to serve the customer. We'll share about could we offer teaching service or education service, and we also talk about how to teach the principles of Agile and Lean to a non-technology sector or non-traditional sector. Thank you. That's what for group 3. Anything to add from group 3?
Thank you, group 3. That was very insightful.
Perfect. Thank you.
Group 4.
I guess I'm the only one left. Well, basically, we talked about the isolation and how we can deal with isolation and making people be productive using isolation. And then my other idea was, since another big problem is the racism, so having an agile team, maybe trying to form a more inclusive agile team to deliver a more inclusive product. That's it, I guess, unless someone else in my team that wants to talk about it. So that's it.
Thank you, Dean. Group 5.
So Dean, sorry, I was on mute. I was on Miro and I didn't go back to Zoom. But we did talk about the mental health and I think it was Dan wanted to talk about distributing test kits for people at home. And and then Dean, we did talk about doing events and trying to make people, feel more involved and engaged because of, mental health. I was saying how mental health, depression, and isolation are really big problems right now.
Thank you, Jennifer. And this goes with my previous talk about ikigai from the Japanese philosophy. We don't need to only talk about ways that we can expand our thinking about agile careers and the agile profession. Sometimes it's just nice to think about ways that we can help others with what the world needs right now. And that can be enough. Maybe it's not going to pay the bills, but hopefully it'll at least, like it did for me, build confidence and give you a sense of well-being. So do we have anyone from group 5?
In terms of group 5, we were kind of trying to get our heads around where to start. And so we started, I think, from areas where we can, what we do today, that we can possibly get paid, and figure out how we can bring that to what the world needs. And so there were things, what that reflect our agile skill sets, like building teams, running Scrum events virtually, educating, coding, coaching, support for groups, and supporting change. And it's also about, some of the skills we have that we're good at, like listening, relating to other people, and learning. What we did find difficult was kind of a lot of the things we had in what the world needs were very aspirational. And how do you tie some of those aspirational things like resilience, joy, stillness? How do you tie those to things that we can do? And so we're kind of left discussing that towards the end of our brainstorm. And I think I covered it. If anyone would care to add more from group 5.
I think you pretty much covered, JF. Thanks. Yeah, we were talking about how the world needs humanity, resilience, and I also added word stillness. Sometimes it feels like all we do is do. And I think like we're at the point when it would be nice to sit still and actually think like, how the bleep did we get here? And so we were trying, as JF put the word on it, like, how can you wrap it in one ticket? And maybe there is more than one ticket, but as you, Pete, mentioned, the definitely an educating and resilience comes from understanding comes from experience comes from education, right? So as a coaches, we can educate and we can coach and we can create spaces where people can practice something safely. We can create spaces where people can sit still and be heard, and we can listen because as a coaches, we do know how. So something along those lines. We had a deep conversation. There was not enough time.
Oh yeah, thank you though. That was extremely insightful and makes me think as well. Maybe next time we can have more time. I was actually not sure if 20 minutes would be enough. What kind of conversations you were going to have, but it did seem like all of you had some pretty interesting conversations. So thank you for that. Group 6. Do we have your representative?
Group 6. Jessica found a way out of her
presentation duties.
Out of her role. She dropped off. All right, so let me jump in instead. I mean, there's a lot of repetition here about, soothing nerves, listening, empathy, building resilience. There's supporting people in adapting, the idea of scenario planning as a way of grappling with all these uncertainties in the future. And good online meetings, intentional connections, just helping people with online tools that, because in Agile, we've already been struggling with virtual teams for a long time, demonizing them much of the time. And here we are, and this is what co-location looks like. And so we've been forced to actually develop some habits, some work habits and collaboration practices that in many other areas, people are not that familiar with. And so what we can get paid for is facilitating meetings, helping people to adapt, teach people how to fish. There's a combination of sort of making sense of things, facing reality, being a sounding board. There's a lot of arguing with reality that is occurring. It's like, it shouldn't be this way. And out of that, a sense of stuckness and helplessness. And what goes with facing reality is, prioritization, in reducing the work in progress, getting a different sense of what is the capacity of our teams, of our organization, and mostly, certainly with my clients, helping them to do less and to do the right stuff less. And those are often going against very strong notions of what's important that were developed, in a different time. I think that's it. That's the highlight.
Volker, well said. And I'll give Jess hell for sticking you with presentation duties. All right, group 7. Do we have a rep for group 7?
That was it. There were only 6 groups.
There were only 6. Okay, perfect. So hopefully some of you got some ideas out of that. Again, the exercise isn't necessarily to come up with some magic formula for how we're all going to be relevant in the future or how some of us might get jobs. But certainly it helps, I think, in my opinion, to reflect on how the world is changing, in what ways it's changing, in what ways can we use our unique skill sets to help our teams to position ourselves in job interviews. Because the more that you can relate to somebody who's feeling the same way and be real with them, and they see you're struggling in the same way that they are, I think that creates greater connection, not just with your teams again, but with future employers. So hopefully this exercise was helpful for you. So I'm gonna go back to sharing. And I know we spoke earlier about stillness. I think that was a great idea. I can't remember, was that Arena that came up with that? Stillness is what I'm hoping for us for the next few minutes here. I'm gonna have us do a small self-reflection piece on just a few questions. I have 5 questions for you to think about based on what we just heard and talked about today. So I'm gonna give about 20, 30 seconds for each of these questions for you to just reflect on your own. You can journal if you like, journal some notes, or you can just think about it on your own and maybe it's gonna unlock some ahas for you. So here's the first one. Where do you find the right balance in Wynn's diagram? Are you right in the center? Are you off to the side a little bit? And what does that speak to in your current position in life? What new possibilities does that open up for you? Does that expand for you what an ideal position or career might look like? Or does it actually focus it? What patterns are emerging in the Agile professional landscape? Again, we talked about what the world needs and what you can be paid for. How can you create intersection between the two? How do you not just bounce back to where you were, but how do you bounce forward? Talking about the Japanese philosophy of Ikigai, it doesn't always have to just be career or your larger life meaning. What gives your day-to-day life meaning? And how can you do more of that? How might you even bring some of that into your career? And finally, in what ways can you help others? I've already heard some great ideas as you all presented. I'm going to end with those of you that know me. I am kind of a pop culture fanatic, especially from the 80s and 90s. So I always like to bring things back to a bizarre reference. This time it feels particularly relevant. Back in 1989, there was Bill and Ted. 2020 hasn't been all bad. We did get a sequel for Bill and Ted, but I thought that this movie is really interesting if you take a look at it, because back in 1989, the premise of this movie, and sorry for the 30-year-old spoilers, but the premise of this movie is these two gentlemen find a time-traveling telephone booth, and they travel to the future, a future that's actually further than we are right now. And what they find in the future is that people had modeled humankind and our philosophy after the lives of these two, who just seem to be kind of, I don't even know how to describe them, surfer dudes, I guess. And their philosophy that they brought to the world seems like maybe they should have traveled to our time. Be excellent to each other. So basically treat each other with kindness, be generous, help others, and of course, party on, dudes. And I have a little trouble explaining that one, but I looked it up in the Urban Dictionary just so that I would get it right. And basically there's a couple of ways that it used to be used in slang, one of which is to express excitement, and another one is basically to say, you do you, or be yourself. And both of those things seem to apply, right? Find ways, the things that excite you in your everyday life, the things that you have passion for, find ways to bring that into your job. At no point in history, at least in my history, has that blended more than right now, your personal life and your professional life. Let's find ways, the ways that we already know that excite us, and kind of blend the two. They're already starting to blend. And the other one is be yourself. Just get to know what you enjoy, what brings meaning to your life, and bring more of it. Thank you, everyone. That's pretty much what I have for my presentation today. Again, I want to thank Team Coco for inviting me. And out of the spirit of generosity, feel free to please email me with any questions you have, or connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have questions, if you have feedback about this session, please do send it to me. And also there is a promotion that Miro is offering for attendees of this event, and that is a free team plan with 5 seats for 3 months. So if you have a free plan already, you can upgrade to a team plan for 3 months. If you have a team plan, you can add an additional 5 seats onto your team plan at no extra charge for 3 months. Or it can actually make your team plan free by granting you a new one. So you have to redeem by August 21st, but hopefully you saw the possibilities in using Miro. That's not really what this presentation is about. I don't want to advertise too much, but I thought we could at the very least offer this to attendees of this event. So thank you again for joining me today, and hopefully you got some value out of it. With that, I'll turn it back over to, I think, Volker, right?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Pete. Certainly made me think. That's awesome.